Hi everyone, this is the NS4B lecture on the peripheral nervous system. I'm Ms. Yoon, and I do apologize for the audio quality. I'm not quite sure how to control the feed into my mic on this computer. So we have two essential questions here. The first is compare the anatomy and function of the two branches of the peripheral nervous system using these vocabulary. So before I tell you about this, I want to see if you can tease it out yourself. So some things that you should know are over here. These neurons all have their cell bodies in the gray matter of the spinal cord. And then here you can see that this neuron here, sends out an axon or an axonal projection into this ganglion. So this ganglion is a bulge in the spinal nerve where this first neuron synapses with the second neuron, which then sends out a projection out to its target organ. Over here, same thing. This purple neuron here starts out in the spinal cord, sends a projection to this ganglion, which is a bulge in the spinal nerve that connects this first neuron to the second neuron, which then goes out to its target organ. You'll notice that down here in the key, you have green axons and purple axons. Some are solid, some are dotted. And you'll also notice that up here in these terms, some things are written in red. So acetylcholine actually is written in red to match the neurotransmitters that are shown here, 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 and here. This, by the way, is called the adrenal medulla. And then you also have other words, epinephrine and norepinephrine, coded in blue to match these neurotransmitters here and here. By the way, I'm calling them neurotransmitters because of the way that they're being used, because this is the nervous system, but they're also classified as hormones. That's not something that we're going to touch on right now because we're in the nervous system. But just to let you know, epinephrine, norepinephrine, which are also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline, they can be used as neurotransmitters. They can also be called hormones. Okay, so see if you can use the key at the bottom, the terms at the top, and logical reasoning and nothing else to put those terms into the boxes and the images on this slide. And I'll walk you through that in a minute, but pause the video and see what you can do. When you're ready, you can unpause it. Okay, you guys. So this top row is the somatic nervous system. Here you have a somatic neuron that is going to go directly to the target organ, which is the skeletal muscle. So that's a skeletal voluntary muscle. And it's going to activate the skeletal muscle to contract using acetylcholine. Compare that against these other guys right here, which are all part of the autonomic nervous system. So in green, you can see the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, where you have these axons synapsing with other postganglionic neurons that then release epinephrine and norepinephrine to activate target organs. Or alternatively, you have a sympathetic preganglionic neuron activating the adrenal medulla, which is a gland that sits on top of your kidneys. So it activates the adrenal medulla to release acetylcholine. It uses acetylcholine to activate the adrenal medulla to release epinephrine and norepinephrine, also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline, into your blood, and then from your blood, it activates these target organs to do stuff. And then last of all, down here in purple, we have the parasympathetic division of the nervous system, which sends out an axon and uses acetylcholine to activate this other postganglionic neuron, which then uses acetylcholine to activate target organs like your heart. for example. You'll notice that for the autonomic nervous system, these three things are all muscles and glands that are involuntary. You cannot control them. Versus up here with the somatic division, this is skeletal muscle, excuse me. This is skeletal muscle that is voluntary. You can control when you use those. So if you were able to master that, then see if you can fill out this really short comparison chart. So up here, voluntary or involuntary. Is the somatic nervous system voluntary or involuntary? What about the autonomic nervous system? What are the effector organs of the somatic versus the autonomic? And so on and so on. And when you're ready, you can unpause the video and we can move on to the autonomic division of the nervous system. Okay, so this is the second question that we're answering with this lecture. What is the anatomy and function of the autonomic division of the nervous system? You should be able to answer this question using all of these terms. And we're not going to discuss the somatic division anymore because it's really simple. It's literally just here's a neuron and it goes out to skeletal muscle and it activates it using acetylcholine. So the rest of this lecture is all about the autonomic division of the nervous system, which you should remember is the involuntary motor branch of the peripheral nervous system. It controls smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and glands, and information from the central nervous system activates nerves that release neurotransmitters, which then signal the appropriate muscle and gland to either do fight or flight, that's the sympathetic response, or to do rest and digest, that's the parasympathetic response. So comparing the two, if you have the fight or flight response, you're activating the sympathetic nervous system. Signals from the brain go down the spinal cord, and you can see these little black dots are the cell bodies of the preganglionic neurons that are part of this pathway. And then those go out and synapse with other neurons, postganglionic neurons, in ganglia that are either found here in the sympathetic trunk, so this vertical line right here that's parallel to the spinal cord, that's called the sympathetic trunk. It's basically just aligned ganglia. And then those send out projections to target organs to basically trigger that fight or flight response. So your eyes will dilate, your lungs will, bring in more air, your heart will beat faster, and so on. Compare that against the parasympathetic nervous system, where the signal will originate in the brainstem, or down here in the sacral region of the spinal cord. And then you may or may not use ganglia. So you can see some ganglia here, no ganglia down here, to activate these target organs to rest and digest. So you're going to slow your heart rate, you're going to slow your breathing, you're going to stimulate your gut to digest food, and so on. When we talk about how these two branches of the autonomic division of the peripheral nervous system, how they work, one of the main ways you should be able to compare them is by how they use neurotransmitters. So the three neurotransmitters that are used in the autonomic nervous system are acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. And once again, these are also called hormones, but I'm going to call them neurotransmitters for the purposes of this lecture. So acetylcholine is shown being released by black arrows. So here you can see for both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions, the preganglionic neuron will originate here in the spinal cord, which is part of the central nervous system. And then they'll send out axons, these long axons. And so now that you're leaving the spinal cord, you're now in the peripheral nervous system, right? So these axons over here for the sympathetic nervous system will synapse with these postganglionic neurons to activate them to then trigger target organs to do fight or flight. How does this preganglionic neuron activate these gray postganglionic neurons? Well, it uses acetylcholine right there. So acetylcholine would be released by vesicles at the synaptic cleft, there and there, which would then trigger sodium channels in the postganglionic neuron to open up, which then starts an action potential in the postganglionic neuron. Same thing here with the parasympathetic nervous system. You can see that you have this long axon that goes out to a ganglion where it activates the postganglionic neuron using acetylcholine, and then that one activates target tissues using acetylcholine again. I don't remember if I already defined what a ganglion is, but this yellow circle here and here represent ganglia. Ganglia are bulges in the spinal nerve that protect the places where two neurons connect to each other. And that's all that ganglia are. Okay, so the sympathetic nervous system, you can see, utilizes acetylcholine to connect this preganglionic neuron to the postganglionic neuron. Same thing with the parasympathetic nervous system, but now this is where you get some differences. The sympathetic nervous system also utilizes norepinephrine and epinephrine. So norepinephrine is shown being released by this green arrow, right? The green arrow shows release of norepinephrine, either directly into the bloodstream, and then the bloodstream carries the hormone out to the target tissues, where it activates the target tissues. Or alternatively, the postganglionic neuron might go directly to the target tissues, so it might not even utilize the circulatory system, and it might activate the target tissues directly using norepinephrine, which is also called noradrenaline. You'll notice that the parasympathetic nervous system doesn't use noradrenaline. Neither does it use epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline. So same thing as before, epinephrine can be utilized by the sympathetic nervous system, which releases it into the bloodstream, and then it's used to activate target tissues. It leaves the blood and activates target tissues throughout your entire body. So once again, when we talk about how the sympathetic versus parasympathetic divisions use neurotransmitters, they both use acetylcholine, but the sympathetic nervous system also utilizes norepinephrine and epinephrine, also called noradrenaline and adrenaline, to activate target tissues, either directly or by using the blood to send these hormones to multiple target tissues throughout your body all at once. So now let's get into the gross anatomy of the sympathetic division of the nervous system. So describe how the anatomy of the sympathetic division of the peripheral nervous system supports its function, and predict how overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system can cause health problems. You should be able to answer that question using these vocabulary. So let's just start with the parasympathetic division because it's simpler. You either are going to have preganglionic neurons that originate up here in the brainstem or down here in the sacral region of the spinal cord, which then either send out projections to ganglia that are close to the target organs, out here, 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 or they might send neurons directly to the target organs without using ganglia. And once again, they would use acetylcholine. They would use acetylcholine to activate those target tissues. So that's all that we're going to say about the parasympathetic nervous system. This is how it's organized, and it basically triggers rest and digest responses. Contrast that against the sympathetic nervous system. So this is a little more complicated, and the reason why is you really need to have a fine-tuned, coordinated response to some threat in your environment. So it could be like something that's really stressful for you, like you're being chased by a lion, or you're studying for a test, or whatever you find incredibly stressful, that would activate this fight or flight response. So you need to coordinate all of your target organs to respond in just the right way to allow you to escape from danger and perform your best in these situations. So you're either going to have the preganglionic neurons originating in the thoracic and lumbar regions of your spinal cord, going out to ganglia that are near target organs down here. So here's the stomach, here's the liver, here's the kidneys, the bladder, etc. Or they're going to send their projections, their axons, to the sympathetic ganglia that are part of the sympathetic trunk. And this gray region here that runs parallel to the spinal cord is called the sympathetic trunk. It is just a collection of ganglia, just those bulges in the spinal nerves that protect the places where these neurons synapse with each other. But these sympathetic neurons can send axons to the sympathetic trunk, to ganglia there, where then they connect with other neurons that go out to the target organs up here in your eyes, your lungs, your heart, to basically coordinate fight or flight responses. So you're going to open your eyes more, bring in more light so you can see better. You're going to relax the bronchi in your lungs so you can take in more oxygen. You're going to accelerate the heart so that you can pump out more oxygen to your muscles. You're also going to trigger your liver to release more sugar so that you can feed your muscles so that they're primed and ready to fight for you or to flee for you. So there are three different pathways that we're going to look at here that your sympathetic nervous system utilizes to coordinate your target tissues to respond for you in a threatening situation. So the first pathway is if you have a cell body, which is shown by this black dot, that would originate in the gray matter of the spinal cord. It would go out through the spinal nerve to a ganglion right there that would be located closer to a target organ. And so that postganglionic axon would then trigger the target organ, in this case the small intestine, to inhibit digestion, because that's not what's important right now if your life is in danger. Here's another pathway. So let's follow this green neuron. Here's the cell body. It would send out its axon to the that region of the sympathetic trunk. Here is the sympathetic trunk. Oopsie, excuse me. So it could send out its projection to a ganglion on its own level, right? Same level as where this transverse cross section of the spinal cord would be, where it would then synapse with another neuron that would then go out to a target organ. Or alternatively, you could have follow the red neuron. You could have a neuron that originates in this cross section of the spinal cord that then would go out, and it would go up to a different level in the ganglion on a different level of the sympathetic trunk, which would then synapse with a neuron and go out to target organs to do things like, open up your blood vessels, cause your heart to pump faster, cause your muscles to, prime up, things like that. Okay, so those are the three pathways for the sympathetic nervous system, and here are your key takeaways. The somatic division of the nervous system is voluntary, and it uses acetylcholine to innervate skeletal muscle. The autonomic division is involuntary, and it utilizes acetylcholine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, once again, which are also called adrenaline and noradrenaline, to innervate your involuntary muscles, smooth cardiac, as well as your glands. Now, when we talk about the autonomic division, there's the parasympathetic, or rest and digest part of it, which originate nerves in the brainstem and the sacral spinal cord and have ganglia near their effector organs. Or you have the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, that's the fight or flight one, where the nerves originate from the thoracic and lumbar spinal cord and may have ganglia in the sympathetic trunk, pelvis, or near the effector organs. Some sympathetic nerves innervate the adrenal medulla, which are those glands on top of your kidneys, to release the hormones epinephrine or norepinephrine and norepinephrine. So that's adrenaline and noradrenaline. That can go into the blood, which then goes out to all of the parts of your body. And then to answer that last part of the essential question, you guys do need to know that when you are under chronic stress, that means that you consistently are going to have high levels of stress hormones such as these guys, as well as another one called cortisol. And that can generate widespread and lingering effects, particularly with your blood vessels and your cardiovascular health, which can cause health problems if your sympathetic nervous system remains overstimulated over an extended period of time. So if we're talking about you're stressed out for like 1 or 2 weeks, you know, you're going to have elevated levels of stress hormones, and then eventually things will go back to normal. But if you're under chronic stress that lasts and lasts and lasts, like for example, if you're in a situation of abuse, or if you're in a situation of, you know, extreme poverty or financial stress, or if you're under, you know, stress from like health conditions like cancer or whatever it might be, and if you're not dealing with that stress, then it will trigger even more problems that will eventually wear away at many of your body systems, including your cardiovascular health. For that reason, regardless of your circumstances in life, it is key that you learn how to manage your levels of stress. And one of those ways is to, you know, through prayer, through meditation, through putting your trust in a God who is, you know, able to take care of you even when you're not able to take care of yourself. And that's it for the peripheral nervous system.